join me in welcoming Melissa Ann Pinney.
Thanks, Molly. I'm so pleased to be here. I'm really honored to have my work here and to meet you all and be part of this community. When I walked in last night, I don't know how many of you were here for the opening last night. I mean, it was so vibrant. The place was packed with people and with photographers. So it's a great honor. Thank you. Okay, so I thought we would start on this wall, and whether you're a photographer or not a photographer, I know for me it's really interesting to hear about the process of how people make the pictures that they make. So that's what I was going to start with, and also to say, if you have any questions or comments along the way, please feel free. You don't have to wait till the end. So this project started in 2018. I was invited to be part of a large project of about 20 artists at that time who were in different Chicago public schools. And it was very exciting. It wasn't very organized. I mean, it took me months to say, okay, what school, what's my school? And I didn't choose the school. I was just kind of assigned one. And it was really lucky that I was assigned to the Bell School, which had about 1,000 kids. They had a deaf program, a neighborhood program, and a gifted program. So it was this huge school in a huge old Chicago school building, K through 8th grade. And when I got there, even though I really wanted to be part of the project, when you actually get there and get to the school, I'm thinking, okay, now what do I do? How do I make, what I think of as real pictures here that aren't just pictures of cute kids, because there were lots of cute kids. And when you have a camera around kids, they all jump in front of the camera and, flash the peace sign, or depending on the school, their gang signs that you don't really know what they mean. So, how to get past that and how to learn how to make pictures in a new environment. And the thing that most struck me about the Bell School was play. The most fun for me was to be outside on the playground with them, because there'd be hundreds of kids running around, screaming, laughing, running, and making up games. And that was really interesting too, to see, to just be kind of, they ignored me after a while. To see what they did, the games that they made up. It was all made up, all improvised play. And I thought, well, that's what my photography is too, when it's the best. Is when I'm not making a picture I've already made before, maybe that's where you start, because you have to start somewhere. But to kind of get in tune and in rhythm with the kids and what was happening. So this picture is on the playground at the Bell School, and first I saw the girl. Well, first I saw the boy with his book, because the light was bouncing off the book. It was a reflector, bouncing light into his face. And then as I kind of stood there watching that, another child came up. He's from the deaf program, and started reading over his shoulder. And it was a way that you're sort of a catalyst with the camera sometimes, or maybe just being an observer or a witness, and things start kind of coalescing around you and around what you're observing. And it just got more and more interesting, and then there's stuff going on in the background. And people have asked, well, how did you get that? Like, as though it was all right there waiting for me just to walk by, but it kind of evolves. It's a process. The second picture was from a spring dance. They're all lying down sleeping. But they're all 8th graders, so the 6th, 7th, 5th graders are wild and frantic, but the 8th graders are too cool, and they're all sitting down. But what really struck me about that grouping was the kind of physical intimacy, the ease that the kids have with each other. And I see that in all the schools where I've been. And it's so different, you know, from growing up when it was keep your hands to yourself. That was at home. I had 7 brothers and sisters, but it was also definitely in Catholic school. You weren't hanging on people and hugging and touching and all of that. And also because they're boys, I think it's maybe more expected to think of girls being more physically intimate like that. The next picture was at another dance. They called it Steppin' Fest, and they had a DJ and calling out the dances, and the kids were wild. I mean, they had so much fun. And different classes came at different times, and when the 5th grade boys were in there, it was like, oh, I gotta get out of here. They were so sweaty and excited and jumping up and down. But one of the things in the schools, you know, the buildings inside, you never knew what the light was going to be like. And some of the schools are horrible. They have very little light, the windows are small. If it's not sunny in Chicago, which is probably most of the time, you know, there's just not good light inside. But this building was on the 3rd floor, so it wasn't obstructed, and it had a wall of south-facing windows, which meant, you know, if there was sun, it was most of the day. The next image is from Jenner School, and so I started at Bell in 2018, and then at the beginning of 2019, a different school invited me to come, having seen this work. And it was called Jenner Academy, and Jenner had been a project school in Cabrini Green. And when they tore the projects down, the school got very tiny, so it was a big building. It wasn't that old. They had built a new building. It was 20 years old. But they had a tiny class. And then a mile to the east in the Gold Coast, which kind of says it all, was an older K through 12 school that was almost all white. And they had too many kids and not enough space. So Jenner had too much space and not enough kids. And it took years for the 2 principals of those schools to make a merger happen. And Chicago, if you don't know, is a really segregated city. Geographically, the schools, the neighborhoods, socially. So, I mean, these schools were a mile from each other. So they had this merger in 2019, and they invited me to come and photograph it, and I said, I'd love to do that. I won't do PR pictures, though. I mean, I'm going to come, but I'm going to photograph what I see. And they said, okay, so that's what I did. And it was very difficult for a whole lot of reasons, but one was the building itself and the light, and the other was the tension and the kind of, there was just a lot of tough feeling around, and I think most of it was not about me being there with a camera. But some of it probably was too, and you know, the kids didn't always know, even though it had to go through the bureaucracy to be there in a public school. That doesn't mean that the kids know when you're walking around that they know why you're there or what you're doing or even who you are. So I made a bunch of pictures, but I wasn't really happy with anything that I did, you know, for me. And I thought about giving up, and then I thought, no, I don't want to give up. I think I'll sort of double down and go more often. So I just kept going back, and this picture was one of the first ones that I really felt, you know, that I felt happy with. And one of the things I learned was, you know, like sort of photo 101, what I would tell a student, like, go where the light is. So that was a western-facing door, and when at dismissal, the kids came down the stairs there. So this is now like mid to late May, so I've been there for months, and the kids at least were used to me, and some of them knew me. So after that, I felt like there were a lot more possibilities for me as a photographer to get something that I felt was sort of real. and a lesson in just being persistent and keep going back. So that's where I started. That one was Jenner. I think those were the 5th grade boys at lunch. And the next one is from Ogden High School. Yes?
How do you pronounce that, and what part of Chicago was that in, school? Or was Jenner School? How do you
It's called Jenner Academy for the Arts, but now it's Ogden Jenner.
Okay, so it's Jenner.
Jenner.
So was that
So Jenner was in the projects, which Cabrini Green on the north side of the city. And that's like a whole nother story, how those projects got torn down and what happened to
that's
that
North
land.
Chicago?
It's on the north side of Chicago.
It's not by Hyde Park, right? Hyde Park's on the other side.
Hyde Park's on the south side. So this is part of the city, I guess like just north of downtown. So one thing I discovered, so I went to Ogden High School next, and Ogden was kind of a feeder school for Jenner and for the Ogden Elementary School. So it's all now Ogden International Schools, the 3 different campuses. And a lot of the kids that I met at Jenner went on, so when I went to Ogden in the fall of 2019, kids came running up and hugged me, they knew me, and it was also very reassuring for me because it's hard to walk into the schools with a camera. So some of the kids in the photograph on the end they're from Ogden High School. That was the track team last spring. When the school shut down in March of 2020, nobody knew what was going to happen or when they would open again. And in the fall, the schools hadn't opened except they had outdoor sports. So I went to track, I went to cross country. I guess cross country was in the fall. So that's how I stayed in touch with the kids. And many of those kids in that photograph I had originally met at Jenner. Should we come around this way? Are there any questions or comments?
So you sort of touched on this a bit, but so it was explained to the kids at all, why you were there to the parents, or was there sort of some understanding we're going to have a photographer on campus for the next couple of years? And then my second part of the question is, what were their various reactions, and did anyone not want to have their picture taken? But it sounds like you built relationships over time, but how did that go?
I think that there's a newsletter, and I think it was announced in the newsletter, but that still doesn't mean that everybody reads the newsletter, and certainly the kids don't read the newsletter. So, I just started making it a practice of introducing myself and saying that I was there documenting the school. I didn't know it was going to be for a couple of years. I really didn't know how long it would last. And yes, there are always kids who don't want their picture taken. And, if they put their hand up or they turn their head away or they put their hoodie over, and I'd say, oh, you don't want to be in the picture, or you don't want your picture taken. I won't do it then, if you don't want me to. And now that I have this Daymeyer Fellowship, which is from Columbia College, to work in the schools, for this year and hopefully part of next year anyway. At least at the high schools, when I say I'm here on a fellowship from a Daymeyer Fellowship from Columbia College, they're very excited because many of them want to go to Columbia. And that's something that they know. When I said I'm here from CPS Lives, everybody was like, CPS Lives? They hadn't heard of it, and it didn't mean anything. So that's actually been very helpful. And the kids have to sign a release. And when I was at the Bell School, the principal would go through look up every kid and every picture, trying to find the releases. And it's not just for me. I mean, they have releases on file for all the kids because their pictures are taken or they're recorded for all kinds of things.
It's really clear that you have their trust, and I'm just wondering how it was, how long you felt like before they started to just just trust you and not be on display, like you said in the beginning, the peace signs, and they'd see the camera. And then how long did it take till they were just, oh, it's Melissa again, oh, and.
Well,
and
they'd
just
say, oh, it's that old white lady again.
Yeah.
Just a second. That still goes on. It's not like we ever got past that. Kids still do that. And I think so for me, I feel like it's my job just to wait that out, So if kids want a picture, I make the picture. And I'm writing down names and numbers. Now, I can't do that with the younger kids because I'm not going to text. Even if I could, I wouldn't text them or email them as an adult, that their parents don't know.
You said you're sharing in your artist statement. You said you're sharing.
So either I email or I text, and they know how to get in touch with me. And I tell them, if you haven't heard from me, please don't hesitate to remind me because I've got a lot of kids, and it's really difficult to keep track. I'm writing on the fly, while I'm making pictures, and I'm taking down names. And if I have them write it, I can't always read it. So. That's a big organizational project I need to do.
And one more question. Were you in the schools how often? Like 3 days a week, for a couple hours, or what was your routine? Did you ever have one, or you just chose randomly dances, things at night? I'm seeing you were there all different
right.
times.
Well, any big event like a dance is great. I mean, anytime the kids are en masse, kind of free. So I would go, really all different times. Usually about 3 days a week. Now I'm going to 3 different schools. So 3 days a week means once at each school.
Right.
But I also, went to these meets and things after school and on the weekends. So what I like to do is photograph the kids when they're not in the classroom. So that means, lunch and recess. Sometimes in the hallways. But I found in the classroom, I don't know, first of all, it's not as interesting. They're static. They're not chained down to their desks or anything, but they're sitting. And it was so disruptive. I could see that it was so disruptive for me to be there. So now, I try to go when there's light. That's another thing. So it will all get better as April goes on. Somebody had a question in the back.
I did, but you covered it, and I read you, so.
Okay, all right. The thing about trust is odd. Sometimes, and I'll tell you when we kind of walk around, some of it I think is just sticking around, and especially the kids who are in high school now who've seen me for years, and I photograph their sports events and given them pictures, and they appreciate that.
Yeah.
So. Especially at a school like Ogden where they don't have anybody doing that on a regular basis. But sometimes it's just, I think it's not that they really know me and trust me in a kind of rational way. I think it has to do with the way I want to photograph people and sort of the intensity and my commitment to it, and I think that the kids feel that, and they know, if I do the pictures and I say, well, I don't think we really, can we try it again, can you meet me tomorrow? So I think they respond to that. So this fall, because of this Daymeyer Fellowship, and because I knew somebody who worked at Senn High School, which is a very different school on the north side. It's Senn and Senn Arts. So it's a neighborhood and a magnet school. And kids go to all these schools. These kids are traveling sometimes 2 hours a day to get to the school, 2 hours each way. But so Senn Arts, this person whose pronouns are they and them, and whose name is Moon, M-U-N-E-M-R, obviously was a Senn Arts student. And this wasn't like Halloween or a costume day. This is just how kids at Senn dress and come to school. which is pretty wonderful. These two girls, Jalen and Misha, are also from Sen, and you get a sense there of the building in the background. I don't know if any of you are familiar with some of these Chicago school buildings. They're over 100 years old, and they're like fortresses. And Sen, had the money to renovate it, so it's got these huge windows, huge. If you see the video, it's conveniently playing right now. The gym at Sen, and that's another wall of south-facing windows, so on a sunny day, the light in there is incredible. This young couple is also from Sen. And Colin, the next portrait, I think he was a 6th grader. He was at Jenner. The next two are both Ogden high school kids, and Sebastian was a senior, so that was Valentine's Day of 2020. And he had he's interested in fashion design, and he designed and made that suit. And I had photographed Sebastian and Natalie, his girlfriend, and Natalie is in the video at the end of that first video. So, I asked him if I could photograph him that day, and he was coming down the stairs, and he and Natalie were both telling me, "Oh, but you can't do, we have to go someplace else. The light isn't good here." I said, "It's okay. I think I'll figure it out."
The beautiful purple stairs, though.
Yeah, well, kids have done that more than once, told me, "Oh, that's not good. Don't do that. You should be over here, or you should have it look this way." And I said, "Okay, well, tell me what you think." Kovia is the one in the washroom, and that's one of the places. Ogden is a high school, it's part of this Ogden International Schools, but it's in a building that was repurposed. It's built in 1956 as an elementary school. So completely different than the feeling you get at Sen. And very little light. But Kovia is somebody that I met the first week I was at Ogden, so that would have been in May of 2019. It was Pajama Day. And I've been in touch with her ever since and made a lot of pictures of Kovia. She's now a senior. And that's the picture. I don't know if you read this or if you noticed that there's a video up here, but I post the photographs on Instagram, and the kids respond to the pictures. Sometimes just comments, sometimes they DM me. But Tasharia wrote a poem in response to that portrait of Kovia, who is a friend of hers. And Tasharia was on the track team. She's a year younger than Kovia. And it just, floored me that somebody wrote a poem. And it's a really powerful poem. And I encourage you, it's the first thing on the video. If you put the headphones on, you can listen to it, and the text is printed out there. Because I've thought about ways to collaborate with the kids. And as part of this fellowship, I've done some classes, I've taught classes and done critiques, and we're bringing a group of kids down to the dark rooms at Columbia. But this was something I hadn't thought of, but really just, to me, the most meaningful kind of collaboration, where, someone actually made art in response to mine. So do you want to kind of turn around? So these are all of the 3 on the right are all from dances and parties. The top one is from Sen. That was homecoming last fall. So because of COVID, obviously they had their masks on, but also they divided the school up in, there was freshman, sophomore dance, from 3:30 to 5:30 or something like that, and then junior, seniors later. So I think her name is Arson, and I think she's a sophomore. Down below is, on the right is homecoming, but that's from Ogden in 2019. And those 3 girls are seniors and they graduated in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic. And, you know, I'm always interested to see what the girls are wearing, you know, and, you know, thinking back to the kinds of things we wore to dances, I think there's so much fashion now that's affordable and fun, and they make their own dresses, and Kennedy and Mariah, who are the girls on the bottom right, told me that they ordered the dresses from a designer on Instagram, you know, that a lot of the girls had. Kennedy's father was a paramedic, and he died in the COVID early on in the pandemic. Jacoby is the one on the left of that little group, and that was at the senior prom, Ogden Senior Prom in 2019. So I had really just started photographing at that school, and I didn't really know anybody yet. But I went to the prom, which was downtown Chicago at the Knickerbocker Hotel, and I never really printed this picture. I don't know, you know, there's a lot of pictures and you don't always see things right away. So I wanted to use it for this show, and I contacted the principal at Ogden because I didn't even know Jacoby's name. And he told me his name and said he had been killed a couple of weeks before that. He'd been shot and killed in Chicago. So I went back and looked at all the pictures that I had from that prom, which is the only time I ever had any contact with Jacoby. And there were a lot of pictures of him. He had made an impression on me, and I sent them all to his mother, who was very excited that his image was going to be in the show.
How much are you dealing with like worrying about violence when you're in the schools?
For myself,
Yeah,
I'm not worried
you're not worried.
at all. No, I'm not worried at all. I think, for the most part, the kids are the ones who are at risk for violence, and not necessarily in the schools.
I just meant like walking to the schools or anything like that for the kids as well as you. Like how, is that I would assume, my guess is that a lot of the kids have been impacted by violence in some way, and you know what a school goes into when they've lost somebody like Jacoby. You know, and I'm just curious, in Portland it becomes like a complete day of mourning, like if there was a school shooting or something like that. But I'm just curious about what it is like in Chicago. I think it is very different than it is in Portland. So I'm just asking you to like comment on that if you have any comments. You may not.
Well, I didn't find out about Jacoby until after the fact. So the school, the kids themselves did a memorial on that Friday of the week that he was killed.
Yeah.
And I didn't know about it,
Right.
so I didn't go.
Right. Yeah.
You know, but he's not the only one.
No.
In the fall, there was, for the Day of the Dead, there was an altar dedicated to a girl whose name I'm blanking on now, just because I'm nervous, but who was a Jenner kid. You know, so she had gone to Jenner, and she was 16 years old, and she got out of the car and was shot and killed. And she had a twin. And, you know, I think I told Chris last night, it never occurred to me, you know, I just didn't think of it, that people would be contacting me for pictures, you know, of children that had died, you know, from the schools. And so, and there was another boy after Jacoby this year. So, and that's just in the Ogden Jenner schools. So, the picture of Lizzie. Lizzie is a freshman at Sen, and I saw her at dismissal, you know, coming down the hall, and she wasn't dressed exactly like this, but very close. She had on sunglasses over her eyeglasses, and she had stickers on the sunglasses. And, I mean, she was embellished from head to toe, and so she was agreeable. You know, we went to the gym because that's where the light is to try to make a portrait, and it was winter and the light was going fast, and I wasn't very happy with the pictures. And I asked her if she wanted to do it again the next day. So I met her again the next day, and now she got dressed for the pictures. So we had great light. We can see the shadow of Lizzie. But the other thing that happened, while we're making these pictures, is that the basketball team came and they started to run around the gym, for warm up for practice. And at first I was kind of annoyed, like, they're in my picture, until I realized it's going to be a better picture, with the right shadow. And then it was just a question of kind of waiting, till he ran past me. So, right, because the shadows are falling to the right. The light is coming from the left. And I thought it was, there's the mask, how to wear your mask up on the right. And Lizzie, who it's clear has cut herself, has had some trauma or distress, and knew she was going to be photographed, and wore short sleeves. So she doesn't want to talk about it, but she doesn't try to hide it either. So this photograph was at the Arts Club in Chicago in a members show, and Lizzie and her family came to the opening, and she talked. She's an artist. I think she's also a singer. She's in the arts program at Sin. And she also has a twin. So, should we move around to the final ball? This portrait of Jael was also from Ogden in May or June of 2019. And this picture is in that Outwin Uchiever portrait exhibition at the Smithsonian, at the National Portrait Gallery. So, what do I want to say about that? I'm hoping that Jael and her mother, J.L., I'm sorry. I had her name and the spelling of her name, but she left Ogden. I never saw her again. She was homeschooled after this. So when I spoke to her mother and I said Jael, she said, no, it's J.L. But in my head, for 2 years, I've been saying Jael. And this is, if you take a look at my books or any of my older work, there's a lot of pictures with mirrors. Obviously there's pictures in these women's washrooms where it's such an odd space, like not really private, but not really public, and like when I photographed weddings, the kind of thing where the women are together getting ready, and there's a sort of camaraderie and intimacy to what happens in the women's washrooms. And the girls, especially in high school, though she's the only one in this picture, but especially in high school, that's where the girls gather. But here I liked the way the mirrors were kind of twin mirrors and how they fracture the space. The next portrait is Kanila, and she's a Sen student, and that's in there. They have a black box theater that Harold Ramis's parents donated because he went to high school there. And I walked in and saw the light in the afternoon and just thought, I have to find somebody to photograph in here. And so I found Kanila. And she said, well, I have a test in 15 minutes. And I said, okay, well, let's see what we can do in 15 minutes. She's also a dancer at Sen and a choreographer. Nico is another student at Sen. He's already gone. I just found out he's already transferred. They have already transferred to another school. This is a real learning thing for me, that assumptions I made about who people were and what their gender was, and of course, being corrected by my daughter, who's 26, but also being corrected by the students and trying to remember The two girls are from Bell. That was also in February of 2020 or early March. They were 8th grade students. Sam and Lily. Sam is the one in the back. She was sitting in a wheelchair. And Sam is somebody I knew from the beginning at Bell School, and she didn't want to be photographed. And, you know, I wanted to make sure that I didn't leave out people, you know, that if she didn't want to be photographed, you know, that it was her choice. And, you know, over the 2 years that I was there, she changed her mind. Bryce is from Jenner. That was last spring. There was just a tiny, you know, small group of students who came to in-school school. And I think it was, well, it was after Juice World had died, and that's why Bryce was wearing that sweatshirt. The two girls on the end are Zamaya and Miriam, and I met them at cross country in the fall of 2020. And that was just taken on the side of the school, you know, again, just looking for the light. Yes.
So I know some of these portraits are like, you know, you get 15 minutes. How long do you like, granted, off their schedules without being disruptive to the sitters, like how long do you like to spend, you know, with each portrait? Like if you were to have that control, like how long, you know, just like time-wise, is it 15 minutes, 2 minutes, an hour? Or is it like shorter in the beginning and then as you build rapport, you can kind of, you know, be more flexible?
You know, if people will give me the time, I'll just keep going. But that's a really good question, because that's the thing about the school pictures is you don't have time. You know, they're on their way out, or they're going to class, or they have to go to lunch, or whatever. So it's hard to answer. It would have been nice to have more time with Kenila, but I was very happy with what we did. And it doesn't, more time doesn't necessarily mean a better picture either. Sometimes, you know, you look at your work and you think the first one was the best, and then I just proceeded to wreck it, you know, picture by picture. I've seen that a lot, you know, either on old contact sheets or on the, you know, your digital in Lightroom or something. So, yeah, that happens. Like you see something and it's intuition and instinct, you know, and experience, and then you start thinking, maybe that shouldn't be there. I'm going to move over, or I'm going to do this or that, and you take out the very things that somehow made the picture good. So, yes.
So as you go back with this new identification from Columbia, may I ask how this work has changed you and how you will approach a different school year and a different school that you're representing with the kids? How has it changed you? How has it changed your work? I'm sorry.
I don't even know why that makes me cry, but
It's changed you.
I mean, you can't be in the schools without seeing all the problems of the city and of life, you know, and how the inequity of the schools, you know, how Sen, for instance, has resources and space that Ogden doesn't have. Just even practice fields and things like that, you know, some of those schools look like universities, and others look like repurposed grade schools. And I don't know, I mean, I grew up in Evanston, which just like Chicago was really segregated, you know, even though, so I went to Catholic schools, I didn't go to public school. And, you know, there were people of color at St. Mary's, but socially, it was just completely segregated, just like the town. you know, Evanston is, I think, the first city in the US who's doing reparations. Though I don't know how adequate they are, and how everybody feels about it, but they know that they have a lot of work to do in Evanston. For instance, the beaches just now, this year for the first time, people don't have to buy tokens to use the beach where they pay taxes, which I think was instigated as a means of keeping Black people off the beach. So, you know, that's steeped in my life and my history. I don't know what to say.
You've said a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think we could all see that your work comes from a very deep place. I mean, you know, when you asked that question, it was very powerful. And I wanted to step back sort of even further and sort of say, having immersed yourself through putting in so much time and energy and focus into this project, but into your work over the decades, what do you feel that the work is about? What's that engine that makes you put so much effort and energy and skill into this?
Well, I think it's a spiritual practice. You know, I think it's my secularization of my Catholic girlhood. I mean, I think it's the way that I connect, not just with people, but with the world. You know, that I think if you work, you know, maybe it's not true, and if you work a different way, you can tell me here. But you know, if you're not going out, if you're not working conceptually, where you already have an idea, but you're going out and you just have to be open. What's going to happen? What am I going to see? You know. So it's a way of connecting with everything, with life, not just people, but with everything that's going on. And somehow it all comes together, you know, and I feel like I can see it. And maybe for you or somebody else, that coming together would be a different thing.
I was following up on that. I think that when you take the Chicago story out of it, for us that are not from Chicago and don't have that back history, is that it's just portraits of young people, and all of that. The description of what led up to it is what we see. And I think what we see is just what you mentioned about your own work, about kind of a spiritual sense, finding the best in people or putting people in the best alike. And I think all of that builds up to that experience for us. It isn't about Chicago schools. That just is what is behind the story. And then these portraits are just so evocative on purpose. I just think they're just evocative on purpose.
Yeah, I'm curious, how much work did you do in terms of everything, direction from composition to, what did you say to these kids to affect, you know, their faces, their eyes, you know, how did you direct these people, if at all? And like, how much, what did you say to them to evoke what you wanted to represent?
I don't know.
Not
I mean, it's different all the time. And if I give any direction, it's very specific physical stuff. Like, and mostly it's things that I've seen them do. Like, oh wait, you had your hand up here. You know, can you put your hand back there? Because a lot of times, you know, people get really stiff. I do too, and I say, you gotta breathe. Just remember to breathe. You know, let your shoulders drop. And I mean, the best ones are the ones that they do themselves. So, you know, it's like when I go and I'm taking pictures and I know they're not going to be good pictures, but you just have to kind of get started, you know, and then things start to happen. And that's what happens with the portraits too. So, you know, I don't know why. There's just some people that, you know, I don't know, I see them and I want to photograph them. And sometimes it's like I see the same people. I end up photographing the same people, like Kovia, for instance. There's just some kind of connection. So, I don't know. I hope that answers something. Sorry. Yes?
How do you balance making a picture based on what they want to see represented in the image versus what photo you want to take? So I know you focus on where the light is, and for example, that's a way that you're making the photo, but then is there any collaboration where you say, I want to be photographed in this specific place, or I want my friend to be in this photo with me? Is there any kind of collaboration on?
Yeah, there's a lot. They don't usually say I want to be photographed in a specific place, but kids ask for their, they bring their friends in all the time. I mean, that's the thing about digital is they see the pictures. So I take a picture, they run over, and everybody looks at it. And usually they're surprised. Oh, like, oh, she knows what she's doing. Oh, oh, I like that. And then at the beginning at Jenner, the kids took their phones because they were allowed to have phones that first year and photographed the back of the camera. So they got the picture that way. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a thing like improv, you always say yes. You don't know where it's going to lead, and so I try to take pictures for them too, because they probably want pictures of themselves smiling. But everybody has that kind of fake smile, it's like, and I say, oh, please, relax a little bit. So I think there's a lot of collaboration that way. Anybody else?
And how do you relate with the culture of the image that these students have, which is shaped by social media?
How do I relate to
Do you relate your work with the imagery that the students have, which is and the perception of photography that it's mostly shaped through the mediation of the social media?
I don't really relate to it. I mean, the pictures that especially some of the girls that I photographed, when I look at their Instagram, I'm disturbed, And there was one girl, so she was a freshman, and her Instagram was just filled with pictures of herself, like from here to here or from here to here, and really provocative and really low-cut clothing. And, I called the school counselor. Didn't do me any good, really. They said her parents were aware of it. But it's mostly selfies, very provocative for the girls, anyway. And it's really odd, too. I saw a photograph of, it's in the video, and maybe I should talk about the videos if you're interested, but there was two girls that I photographed, and there are pictures in the video, and I saw one of them the other day without realizing it was the same girl, and she said, well, you photographed me with Faith the other day, and she looked completely different, And I think, her hair was different, she had a hoodie on, she had glasses in the picture, she didn't have glasses when I saw her. But I think there's something about the pictures that, that's what kind of stays in my mind, or the way they looked photographed, and I think that they look older. So like these girls in the Jenner one, those are 7th graders. Those girls are. So that's kind of off your question. But I think what's surprising to the kids about my work is how different it is from the pictures they take of themselves. So I don't know if you looked at the video, but I'll just talk about it for just a minute. It was another kind of happy, unexpected thing that happened with the digital camera, and I'm on the playground and these kids are, so there's like 4 girls sitting on a bench, and then the boys are behind them, they start jumping off a tree stump over them, you know, and then somebody climbs on the bench in front of them, you know, and I'm taking pictures. And, you know, when you play it back on the camera, it's really fun. They're like flip books. And so I started putting them together just, so there's animations, just still photographs, you know, dropped into iMovie. And then with Tisharia, you know, that was a little bit different because they were pictures from all different things that I chose to put together with her poem. But the other ones, like that one, were just a series of still pictures I took of the cross-country team running down the hill. So, and then found music for, and hope I'm not violating copyright. But
We won't turn
you
it
won't
away.
tell. Yeah. But that's another thing I made, you know, I'm talking to the music department at Sen about working with the music students to collaborate with them providing music, you know, and I would love it if other people had poems or any other kind of spoken word things that they wanted to collaborate with. So, thank you so much for being here.